In 2022, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And before that, I didn't even know what ADHD actually was. I wasn't one of those people who spent years wondering if something was off. I just thought I was forgetful, distracted, bad with time, regular flaws that people tell you to fix with bullet journals and self discipline. That's what I actually thought. So when I started therapy for depression, anxiety, and PTSD, I didn't expect any of this. I wasn't looking for another label, I was just tired. But then the person I was with at that time, she said something weird. She was like, "You ever think you might have ADHD?" And I was like, "What?" Because why would I? According to her, the signs were so obvious: chronic forgetfulness, inconsistent focus, possible dyslexia, and a level of restlessness that did not match what I was blaming it on, which was just being stressed. If you know me, there's a catchphrase I always say. I would not say it's a catchphrase, but every time I'm always like, "Oh my God, I don't have energy. Oh my God, I don't have energy." Like that has been something I say even till now because most times I am genuinely very, very tired. So basically, this ex of mine, she wasn't trying to diagnose me. She was just noticing things more than I was, apparently. I did not love the idea, I'm not gonna lie. It felt like another diagnosis was being thrown on the pile. First, depression, anxiety, PTSD, and now ADHD. What is next? I joked about it and I just said that I was collecting disorders like Pokemon cards and I'm just tired of doing that. So I just tried to move on. Spoiler, I did not move on because that idea literally stuck with me and I went on a whole deep dive and eventually I started doing that thing where you replay your entire life like a crime scene to just see what clues you missed. Daydreaming in school, that was a clue. Never finishing anything unless I was obsessed with it. That is another clue. That thing where your brain just refuses to start a task unless the deadline is actively killing you. That is me, honestly. So I got accessed, and yeah, it was ADHD and it was official. It felt like a relief at first. Currently, I'm medicated. I've been medicated since I think early 2023 because I had to do a series of tests to make sure that my body was okay for medication. At first, when I was diagnosed, it felt like a relief. Like I finally understood why I operated the way I did, and it explained a lot. And it meant that I wasn't just lazy or messy or bad at being a person. But right behind that relief just came the part where I was kind of pissed because I spent so much of my time thinking that I was defective and nobody, not teachers, not family, not therapists, nobody ever brought up ADHD, not once. So yeah, I was mad and I was tired, but it wasn't over. A friend of mine, also a psychiatrist that I was working with when I was working in the healthcare field, I was more like his executive assistant. So he brought up something else and he was like, "Have you ever considered doing an autism assessment?" I think is I hadn't. I mean, obviously, I have sensory stuff. Sure, loud sounds they stress me out. They even make me cry sometimes. Certain fabrics they make my skin itch. And I definitely have trouble with social situations that feels effortless for other people. But I just figured that that was me being awkward or introverted or whatever people say when they don't want to say the word autistic. And when I was younger, I was bullied a lot. So I just put it down to the fact that because I was bullied, I just have, awkward situations outside. Still, I started to look into it and it got weirdly familiar. The hyper focus, the burnout after socializing, the mental scripting before basic conversations, the special interests that aren't just hobby, their entire personality traits, it all was there. And that's when I heard the word AUDHD, which is what the internet calls the overlap between autism and ADHD. This is not an official diagnosis, but it explains a lot, like how executive dysfunction, sensory issues, and social confusion can just show up all at once and just make life basically unmanageable in ways that you cannot explain to anybody. So, yeah, it was starting to make sense, but then, of course, I had to go and see another psychiatrist, which was a very huge mistake. The whole point was to get access for autism, but what I got access for instead was a textbook case of clinical bias. He saw the same traits, my flat affect, my literalness, and my discomfort, and I somehow walked away with emotional unstable personality disorder, that is EUPD, or what most people call borderline personality disorder. Now listen, BPD or EUPD is real, it's serious, and it affects a lot of people. But I'm self-aware to a certain extent. And the thing is, it wasn't me. It did not fit my personality. And it felt like a lazy diagnosis that was just slapped on me because I didn't perform the way he expected me to perform. And he put my whole diagnosis on my childhood trauma. The moment I got off the phone, I knew that I was misdiagnosed. And I remember telling him that I don't think I have EUPD. He was like, you have EUPD, you have this, you have that, you have sensory issues, you had trauma as a child and everything. And I was like, it does not mean you have to diagnosed me with EUPD, and this was on the phone. And then he was like, I'm going to prescribe sertraline to you. Sertraline is a medication for depression, and it's something that I took in 2022 or 2023. I can't remember. I took it, and the first 2 weeks of being on sertraline is hell. It is hell, and I might even go back to it because I just had like a discussion with my GP like last week. So it's either I go back to therapy again or I take sertraline, which is a story for another day. But when I dropped that call, I knew I was misdiagnosed, and I also knew exactly why. Because if you're a black woman with neurodivergent traits, they do not see autism, they see attitude, they see instability or non-compliance. And it's not new. There are actual research that show how often autistic women, especially black ones, get misdiagnosed with mood or personality disorders before anyone even considers autism. And sometimes they never do. So, no, I do not accept the diagnosis. I reported him, and during my report, I also put the fact that most autistic black women get misdiagnosed with bipolar and AUPD and all these things. And I do not want to bring race into it, but I just felt that that's what it was. And when he was even speaking to me over the phone, he sounded like he was eating. So yeah, I reported him and I moved on because I'm not doing that. I'm not going to play the role of the difficult black patient so that a clinician can feel like they've solved a problem that wasn't even there in the first place. In the end, I didn't find clarity from the system. I found it in my psychiatric friend and my coworker. He did an assessment with me, and even though it was not an official diagnosis that would be on my file, it was mainly for closure. I found clarity in the community that I have found. I found clarity in community, in friends, in people who live through it and do not need 60 minutes and a clipboard to just see what's right in front of them. That's why I'm creating this video. Not because my story is unique, but because it's not at all. This happens constantly to queer women, to people of color, and especially to those of us living at the overlap of all three. We are constantly undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, or completely ignored. And when we finally do get answers, it's not because the system worked, it's because we pushed for them. So let's talk about why that keeps happening. Let's talk about neurodiversity, misdiagnosis, race, gender, and what happens when all of that collides. Because once you see a pattern, you cannot unsee it. And pretending that it's just a coincidence, yeah, that's not going to cut it anymore. So now let's talk about understanding your diversity. And here I'm going to speak about ADHD, autism, and the spectrum of brains. So basically, if you've been online recently, you've probably heard the term neurodivergent. And if you haven't, congratulations, you somehow missed the internet's collective realization that maybe half of us aren't operating on the factory default settings. Neurodiversity, in plain English, means not all brains work the same way. The idea is simple. Human brains, they do vary. Some people are autistic, some are ADHD, some are dyslexic. And instead of treating those differences like problems, the neurodiversity framework just treats them like, well, differences. This isn't a new concept. It was coined back in the 1990s by Judy Singer, who is an autistic sociologist who had the audacity to suggest that maybe autistic people weren't broken, they were just different. That maybe society is a problem not our neurology. And for the record, she was right. Now, obviously, this idea didn't come from the medical system. It came from autistic people and their allies, aka the people actually living it, which is probably why it makes so much more sense than the outdated deficit based language that we're all stuck with in diagnostic manuals. Neurodiversity doesn't mean there is no struggle. No one is pretending that being autistic or having ADHD is a walk in the park. It means that the struggle isn't just internal. Most of the problems happen when a brain that works one way is shoved into an environment that is built for something completely different. You can be autistic and capable. You can have ADHD and still function. The issue isn't the condition, it's the system trying to shove square pegs into round holes, then blaming the peg for not fitting. Take ADHD for example. ADHD is highly heritable, like 70 to 80% heritable. So if you've got it, there are chances that someone else in your family does too. And no, it's not caused by screen time, sugar, or just being a boy. It's neurodevelopmental. Brain differences, they show up in areas like the frontal lobe, which is the part that is responsible for things like planning, impulse control, and attention regulation, which means stuffs like deadlines, paperwork, and extended eye contact with an Excel spreadsheet. That's not exactly a strength. But weirdly, the same brain that can't remember to reply to a text can hyperfocus on a niche hobby for 6 hours straight without even eating. That's ADHD. It's not about attention span, it's about regulation. Your brain either cares too much or it does not care at all. There is no in between when it comes to ADHD. Autism works similarly. Different writing, same misunderstanding. It's also strongly genetic and it also presents from early development and also wildly misunderstood. Autistic traits often include things like sensory sensitivity, difficulty with social rules that nobody actually explains, and a tendency to fixate intensely on specific interests. It is a spectrum, which means that yes, you can be autistic and need 24/7 support, or you can be autistic and be fine until a group project, a loud bar, or a surprise phone call just ruins your entire week. And here is the fun part: ADHD and autism, they aren't mutually exclusive. You can absolutely have both. The term AUDHD is what people use to describe the overlap. Is it in the DSM? No. Do people use it because the system is still too slow to keep up with reality? Yes. Also, if you're wondering why it feels like every other person on the internet relates to this, no, you're not imagining it. Some people are self diagnosing because of TikToks, but a lot of people are finally recognizing the patterns that went ignored for decades, especially people who aren't cis, straight, white, or male. Why? Because most of the original research was based on, well, cis, straight, white males. Everyone else, they were labeled as difficult, dramatic, or crazy. So, what's the point of all this? It's not about pathologizing quirks, it's about identifying real structural mismatch and also fixing them. Neurodivergent people, they do not need pity, they need accommodations, they need accurate diagnosis, they need to not be gaslit by psychiatrists who mistake sensory overload for a personality disorder. The neurodiversity model doesn't say everything is fine, it says the way we treat people isn't. Instead of asking, what's wrong with you? It asks, what do you need? Which, wild idea, is actually a better question. So before you even start talking about how neurodivergent people are misdiagnosed, dismissed, or ignored, especially if they are queer or people of color, we need to start with this. Neurodiversity exists. It is real. It matters, and the only reason it feels radical is because the world hasn't caught up yet. So now let's speak about queerness and neurodivergence. So here I'm going to speak about why so many LGBTQ plus people are on the spectrum. So here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. A lot of queer people are also neurodivergent. Shocker. Like suspiciously so many people. I didn't think so much of it at first. Maybe I just gravitate towards people who get me, but then the numbers just started adding up. And when you dig into the research, it turns out that this isn't just anecdotal. This is a documented pattern. Let's talk about autism, for example. A study from the Autism Research Center at Cambridge found that autistic people are significantly less likely to identify as straight. And no, significantly doesn't mean a 5% bump. It means that autistic women were about 3 times more likely to identify as lesbians than non-autistic women. Autistic men, 3.5 times more likely to be bisexual, and sexuality, autistic people were 8 times more likely to identify as ace or other. So basically, in one survey, only 8% of autistic women reported being exclusively heterosexual. 8%. Literally, that is so low. So no, the idea that autistic people are detached from sexuality or don't care about relationship is so outdated. The truth is, autistic people often do have rich sexual and gender identities. They just do not necessarily align with what society expects, or let's be honest, what society wants. Now, take everything you just heard me say and copy and paste it onto ADHD. Same trend. A study of teenagers in the southeastern US found that queer teens were 5 times more likely to meet the criteria for ADHD than their straight peers. Another study of adults with ADHD says that 61% identified as non heterosexual. That's over half compared to the 10% average that you see in most adult population. And it doesn't stop at sexual orientation. Gender identity follows the same pattern. Multiple studies shows that transgender and gender diverse individuals have disproportionately high rates of ADHD. One analysis showed that gender variance was 6.6 times more common in ADHD population than in the general public. So at this point, if you're queer and you're divergent and wondering, is it just me? No, it's statistically very much not. But here is overlap. Why does this overlap exist? There are a few theories as to why it exists. Some are biological. There might be shared neurological or developmental pathways, prenatal hormone exposure, genetics, stuff that affects both identity and brain development. That line of research is still early, so we're going to move on. Then there is the social explanation, and it honestly makes so much more sense. If you're neurodivergent, you already exist outside the mainstream social script. You're less likely to follow arbitrary rules because half of the time they don't make sense to you. You don't default to normal because you never were treated like you were normal in the first place. So when society says this is what a boy does or this is what a girl likes, you're more likely to raise an eyebrow and ask, who said that? That ability or maybe necessity to question social norms make it easier to figure out that you're queer, and the tendency towards authenticity that a lot of autistic and ADHD people have, it pushes you to acknowledge it even when it's inconvenient. So no, neurodivergence doesn't cause queerness, but it might help someone to recognize their queerness a lot sooner or at all. There is also the environmental factor. Queer spaces are historically more accepting of people who do not fit into the mold, which means that neurodivergent people are more likely to feel safe there, more likely to explore their identity, and more likely to stay. Over time, that creates communities where both identities, the queer and the neurodivergent, they start showing up more often. And yeah, some of that is self-selection. But as we've seen, the numbers aren't just about environment. There is a real overlap. Of course, intersectionality doesn't just produce community, it also creates a mess. Being queer and neurodivergent doesn't come with a starter kit or a roadmap. Most services are built with only one identity in mind. Autism services often assume that everyone is straight. Queer spaces don't always know how to accommodate sensory overload or social processing differences, and don't even get me started on healthcare. Some providers still act like being LGBTQ plus must be a symptom of autism, as in, are you really a lesbian or are you just confused because of your diagnosis? That's not just offensive. That's how people get misdiagnosed or ignored entirely. And while we are talking misdiagnosis, let's go back to gender. For years, autism and ADHD they were defined by how they showed up in boys. If you were a girl, good luck. Your ADHD was called ditzy. Your autism must, or better off, they were dismissed as anxiety. So if you were queer or trans on top of that, the odds of you being taken seriously dropped even further. This is what happens when systems are built around a single template. Everyone else either has to fit it or fall through the cracks. And here's the flip side: community. Out of all that marginalization, something beautiful has formed, and that is queer neurodivergent advocacy. The term neuroqueer, it actually exists now. There are forums, there are blogs, there are creators, there are entire spaces where being both isn't a contradiction. It is literally the norm. And when I found them, it felt like I was reading my own diary word for word. So yes, the data just shows that queer and neurodivergent identities overlap a lot. And no, it's not a coincidence, it's not a phase, it's not confusion, it's a pattern, and it's one that matters because if we know who's most likely to be left out, misdiagnosed, or misunderstood, maybe we should start building systems that are actually designed for them. But that would require admitting that the old systems were never meant for us in the first place. And that's where we are headed next. So now let's speak about misdiagnosis and marginalization. Here I'm going to speak about Black women, autism, and the BPD bipolar trap. So when I got off the call with the psychiatrist and got slammed with a BPD diagnosis, it felt less like clarity and more like being written into someone else's story. And honestly, I felt so badly. I knew almost instantly that this diagnosis wasn't just inaccurate, it was a warning sign. Not about me, but about the system that I was in. And unfortunately, this isn't rare. This isn't the norm. So if you're a Black woman with autism or ADHD, especially if you're undiagnosed, the odds of getting misdiagnosed with something else are absurdly high. Think mood disorders, personality disorders, anything except what's actually going on. And the reasons they are layered. Let's start with the obvious one: racial bias. It's not just about overt racism, it's about how medical professionals they interpret system, or more accurately, how they misinterpret system. A white woman having a meltdown might be seen as overwhelmed. A Black woman doing the same exact thing might be seen as aggressive, disruptive, borderline. So if you're visibly upset, you're unstable. If you shut down, you're disassociating. There is no room for autism, central overload, or executive dysfunction in that equation. It's just judgment, and the judgment comes fast and loud. The exact same behaviors get read through completely different lenses depending on your skin color. Black girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended from school than white girls, often for behavior that's functionally identical. One gets compassion, the other gets discipline. And that same pattern plays out in mental health care, just with fancier vocabulary and worse consequences. I spoke about this in a video that I did about Blue Ivy. I spoke about how Black girls are being treated worse than white girls, especially when they're in school. So if you'd want to watch, I'm going to put it in the description box so you can watch it after this. Yeah, so like I said, that same pattern just plays out in mental health care system, or it has a fancier vocabulary, but even though it has a fancier vocabulary, it has worse consequences. Then there is the research gap. Diagnostic criteria for autism they were built around white boys, not women, not girls, definitely not Black ones. And if you're not what clinicians were trained to look for, you do not get seen, you get camouflaged. or worse, you get punished for showing up wrong. The review literature calls black autistic girls invisible. That's not a metaphor, that's a direct quote. Invisible in studies, invisible in diagnosis, invisible until the wrong label finally sticks. And if you're dealing with trauma on top of that, good luck. Trauma, it muddies everything. It can mimic autism, it can exacerbate ADHD, or just complicate every clinical interaction. Most providers aren't trained to distinguish between trauma and neurodivergence, especially when they do overlap, which they often do. Autistic women are far more likely to have PTSD than the general population. And when a black woman shows signs of trauma, what gets treated isn't always the root cause, it's the reaction, the surface, the thing that looks more like a diagnosis that they already do recognize. And then comes the BPD trap, because BPD, which is borderline personality disorder, it shares just enough traits with autism to confuse undertrained clinicians. Emotional dysregulation is part of it, identity confusion, trouble with relationships. That's BPD unless it's autism, or unless it's autism that's been compounded by years of masking, rejection, and trying to survive in a world that does not accommodate you. One study actually found that nearly half of the women diagnosed with BPD were actually autistic when accessed properly. And here is where everything gets wild, because nobody actually checks it. So if you're a black woman in distress, the assumption is rarely autism. It's never maybe she's neurodivergent. It's she's dramatic, she's unstable, or she's got personality issues. So instead of getting accommodations for sensory processing or communication differences, you're handed DBT worksheets and SSRIs and told to work on your abandonment issues. And when that doesn't work because it's not what you need, the failure is blamed on you. And that's what happened to me. Flat affect must be disassociation, shut down from being overwhelmed, emotional volatility, quiet intensity, that's a threat. They gave me the diagnosis that fits their bias, not their brain. And if I hadn't pushed back, if I hadn't known how to say, this isn't right, I'll still be sitting with that label that doesn't belong to me. That diagnosis, it almost broke me. I remember crying so much, and I was like, I'm someone, I see myself adopting a child in the future. And even though we are trying to break the stigma around mental health, trust me, it's still there. And I did not want to hold a label that I know does not belong to me. Not because I believed it, but because of how easily it was handed out to me. I started questioning my own sense of self, and that's the most dangerous part of all this. The way misdiagnosis eats at your identity, it turns self-awareness into self-doubt. It convinces you that your correct instincts are wrong and that you don't even know yourself at all. But I did, and I do know myself. So what I needed wasn't a good mood stabilizer or a pathologized identity. I needed tools. I needed strategies. I needed languages. I needed someone to recognize that being autistic or ADHD in a world not built for either can look like instability, but it's not. It's literally survival. And it did not stop at BPD. Black women with ADHD or autism are frequently misdiagnosed with bipolar 2. Why? Because when our energy spikes, maybe from hyperfocus, maybe from excitement, it's read as hypomania. And when we crash from burnout, executive dysfunction, or just plain exhaustion, it's read as depression. What they are saying isn't a cycle of mood swings, it's a natural rhythm of neurodivergence. But instead of seeing a different operating system, they see malfunction. Statistically, Black Americans are more likely to be misdiagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia when the correct diagnosis is something else, usually something less stigmatized, and definitely something that doesn't result in over-medication or institutionalization. The consequences aren't abstract. Misdiagnosis leads to the wrong treatment. That means years of therapy that doesn't help, meds that dull your mind, and constant questioning of who you are, all because the system isn't designed to see you clearly. And here's the thing, I may be broken, but I'm not broken. Hopefully that makes sense. And neither are the other women who have been through this. I've read their stories, black women finding out that in their 30s or their 40s they are autistic and that their borderline traits were actually sensory responses, that the identity confusion just came from years of masking and survival, that the real issue wasn't a disorder, but the fact that nobody ever asked the right questions. And once you have that language, everything clicks. The shame, it goes. The anger, though, that sticks around because I've still not forgotten what that guy did to me, like literally 3 years after. Because it shouldn't take you years of self advocacy to be seen. You shouldn't have to unlearn bad diagnosis to find the truth. The system needs to change. Clinicians, they need to be trained to recognize autism and ADHD in people who don't fit the stereotypical profile. That means women, that means black people, that means people who are queer. Diagnostic tools, they need to be updated. Research, they need to include us, and providers, they need to stop assuming that emotional dysregulation is personality disorder when it could just be someone overwhelmed from being misunderstood for years. Until then, we do what we've always done. We find each other, we compare notes, we figure it out by ourselves, we correct the record. Because the diagnosis they gave me wasn't the one that I needed. But the one I found, that saved my life, that gave me closure. Now, let's talk about what happens when neurodivergence becomes a buzzword. Because awareness isn't the same thing as understanding. And we're about to see what happens when the internet turns diagnosis into content. So here we're going to speak about the difference between romanticization and reality. And I'm going to speak about how neurodivergence is not a fad or a free pass. I did a video some time ago saying ADHD is tired, but you use ADHD as an excuse for everything. And honestly, even as someone that has ADHD, when I see all those things, I get irritated. Spend 5 minutes on TikTok and you'll probably stumble into a post that says something like, I just put my shampoo in the fridge, ADHD strikes again. Or if you've ever felt socially awkward and had intense interest as a child, congrats, you're autistic. And yes, some of it is funny, some of it is valid, but at a certain point, we have to ask, is this awareness or are we just turning neurodivergence into a personality aesthetic? Because lately, ADHD and autism, they have started to feel like they've been put through the social media glamour filter. They've started to feel like they've been put into aesthetic edits, soft pastel graphics, ADHD girly content, post romanticizing being the mysterious autistic introvert who doesn't fit in but knows the secrets of the universe. The representation looks cute, but it's often missing the point entirely. Take ADHD. People have started treating it like the new zodiac sign. It's become shorthand for quirky chaos, forgetfulness, and unfiltered charm. But it's not just cute chaos, it's shame. It's losing your job because you missed another deadline. It's crying at 2 a.m. over a basic task that your brain won't let you start. It's forgetting important things, not because you don't care, but because your working memory is short and executive function is on strike. Priya Patel, a mental health worker who went viral for calling this out, put it perfectly. She said, do you think it's trendy living in a world that isn't built for the way that you are? Her video blew up because people knew that she was right. She talked about how ADHD, especially in women, is being framed as this kind of whimsical, forgetful, spacey energy. Like it's charming, relatable, marketable, not something that ruins your life when untreated.
Someone needs to say something, and I'm going to be that person because I'm sick and tired of seeing some of these videos on TikTok about ADHD. Some people on here make this condition laughable. They make it out to be something quirky or funny or trendy. No wonder neurotypicals don't take us seriously when they think this is what ADHD is. Posting videos saying, oh, you might have ADHD, and then put a video of yourself running around the house. Bro, are you serious? You think that is an accurate representation of what impulsivity and ADHD looks like? You don't want to talk about the fact that we impulsively spend to the point that we might end up in financial debt. We make impulsive decisions based on emotions and don't consider the people that we are going to hurt because of it. We are impulsive to the point that we make dangerous life decisions that can actually put us in life or death situations. And I'm sick and tired of seeing these videos which are like 5 signs you might have ADHD. Are you forgetful? Do you zone out? Like, bruv, you are making neurotypical people think, one, they might have ADHD, and B, ADHD is not that bad because you forget your lunchbox at home every once in a while. Do you think it's funny leaving the house because you forgot your keys that you have to call a locksmith and spend hundreds of pounds to get them to change the locks? Do you think it's quirky that your impulsivity means that you speed and then get caught by the police, and then they find out that you've not done your MOT because you forgot, so you get called up on that too? You think it's funny continuously being late to work meetings or forgetting about them to the point that your boss thinks you're incompetent and you can't handle the job? You think it's quirky not being able to handle any life stress to the point that you either end up in task paralysis and don't do anything, or you get absolutely overwhelmed and completely break down? Do you think it is easy having a brain that just does not shut up? You're trying to focus, but you can't. There are so many thoughts running through your head. You are distracted by ABC constantly around you. And no matter what you do, you just cannot quieten your mind. You cannot focus on whatever you're trying to do. You think that's fun? Do you think it is trendy living in a world that is not built for the way that you are? Do you think it is fun having a condition that makes you feel less than, that makes you feel incompetent, that makes you feel you are not worthy because you just cannot do the simple things that other people can do? So yeah, this shit needs to stop. Honestly, it's literally like, if you pee a couple of times a day, yeah, that's normal. But if you're peeing 30 times a day, then yeah, that's a problem. That is literally what it's like with ADHD. Just because you got distracted by a couple of dogs once when you were talking to someone does not mean you have ADHD. I'm begging you guys, if you make content about ADHD, please tell the full story and explain it properly. Stop making it to seem like this is something silly, because you are actually working against your own people. And if you have ADHD and you've seen some of these videos and it's made you feel a certain way, I am so sorry. I genuinely am, because I know how shit it is. It's not a silly condition. It needs to be taken seriously, and you deserve more than people laughing at you and thinking that it's fun and quirky to have some of these traits. But I promise you, I'm using my platform to show the real side of ADHD, because this has to stop. We need people to really understand.
Autism is getting the same treatment. There is the classic savant stereotype. Every autistic person is either a maths genius or a tech god, and I'm neither any of them. Or there is the misunderstood girl in a flowy dress who reads too many books and doesn't like loud parties. I read many books and I do not like loud parties. But either way, what you don't see is someone who can't handle fluorescent lights without physical pain, or someone who melts down from sensory overload and spends 3 days recovering in silence. That version doesn't trend as well. I don't like the sound of cars when they rev their cars or their bikes. I don't like screeching noise. I don't like the sound of washing machines. Like, I don't like the sound of so many things. And sometimes I break down and I cry because people do not understand. The sound it does something to my brain. But explaining that to a neurotypical person is like, what are you saying? And those are the things that do not trend on social media. And there is a real danger there, because once something becomes aesthetic, it gets stripped of context. The rough edges get sanded down until we're just looking at a sanitized version of reality, and people start forgetting that this is still a disability, that behind the memes are people who have spent years wondering why they can't do what everyone else does with ease. And I'm that kind of person. I just go down and be like, if I was neurotypical, this would be so much easier for me. I'll be able to go through 10 hours at work and still be fine. There is also the self-diagnosis issue. Not the valid kind, but the performative kind. Because let's be clear, self-diagnosis can be very, very real, especially when a formal diagnosis is inaccessible or biased. But then there is the other side, the version where someone watches 3 videos, relates to procrastination, and decide that they must have ADHD. Then they start giving advice or speaking over people who have actually had to fight for accommodations. And it creates this weird feedback loop where the diagnosis means less and less to people outside the community, because they only see it as being used very, very casually and being used as a vibe. And that leads to something worse. It leads to backlash. The more people treat neurodivergence like an accessory, the more society dismisses it entirely. Suddenly, ADHD becomes just an excuse. Autism becomes overdiagnosed, and the people who are neurodivergent, they get caught in the crossfire. They're stuck proving that their experience is real while the internet turns it into a trend. Then there is the accountability problem. Because let's be honest, sometimes ADHD or autism does explain why we did something wrong. Forgetting a birthday, snapping during a sensory meltdown, struggling to read a broom. These things they do happen, but explaining isn't the same as an excuse. There is a line. I'm sorry, I was late. I'm sorry, I'm working on it. It's very different from I'm late, deal with it. I have ADHD. Yeah. One acknowledges impact and effort, the other just dumps responsibility on everyone else. Let me tell you guys a story. So basically, when I was working in one of the best jobs I've ever had in my life, and I'm someone who has never loved any job they like, I got fired. That was last year, and that was because a girl was rude to me. And at first, I thought it was in my head that she was being rude. She was asking me for a favor, but she was asking it in a very rude way. I did the favor, but I thought it was in my head. So I can remember because I was not the only person there. My colleagues were there on the table. And when she left, I asked them, I was like, is it me or was she being rude to me? And they were like, yeah. I was even surprised that one person even said, I was surprised that he did not snap because the way she came at you, I thought you guys had beef or something. And I was like, oh my God, I thought the same thing. So I remember that day I could not sleep. I went home and I was telling like my housemate and I was like, this is what happened. This person was like rude. It was disturbing me. Like it was, I even dreamt of it that night because that's how much it was just playing in my head. And the next day we went to work and then I saw her and I took her to the kitchen and I was like, I don't know, maybe you were in a bad mood, but the way you spoke to me yesterday was rude and I thought it was just in my head, but I asked people there and I told them and they saw what happened and they actually confirmed and validated my feelings. So maybe you were just like you didn't recognize what happened. So if you could like next time if you want me to do a favor for you, you could, tell me in a polite way so that I would like be able to do it because if you notice I was even reluctant to help you but again I had to like put work aside and just do it. And then she was like, oh, I spoke to you like that because I thought we were friends. First of all, we're not friends, we're colleagues, we're not friends. She's like, I spoke to you like that because I thought we were friends. And I was like, we're colleagues first, we're not friends. And she was like, plus I have ADHD, that's how I speak to all my friends. And I told her, I was like, we're not friends, we're colleagues. And I was like, if you want to use ADHD as an excuse, I have ADHD and autism, and I can decide to bring my autistic self out and give you the same energy and you would not like it. And then she was like, okay, if I need you to do anything, I'm going to tell the manager to tell you through me. And I was like, you don't have to do that. You just have to tell me, but tell me politely because you're being rude. And then the next thing, that same day, I'm on the train back home and my manager calls me and tells me I'm fired, that people have been saying that I'm difficult to work with. Which people, that's the only person that's had a problem with, said I'm difficult to work with. The reason why they were able to fire me so easily was because I was an agency staff, so they were like, yeah, I don't come back to work again. And that was the best job I've ever had. That was the best job that I'd ever had because I felt sane, my sexuality felt sane. And just with that, I got fired because I was difficult to work with. Exactly. So yeah, like I said, the other just dumps responsibility on everyone else. And yes, neurodivergent people, they deserve patience. We are navigating a world that wasn't built for our brains. But patience doesn't cancel out accountability. You can be both. In fact, most of us, we want both because we know the damage that comes from using our diagnosis to justify harm. We know the stereotypes that action creates, and we know how easily the entire community gets painted as rude, inconsiderate, or worse just because one person couldn't own their behavior. Some advocates are already speaking up about this. On LinkedIn, I saw someone say flatly, autism doesn't cause harassment, ADHD doesn't make you manipulative, and those behaviors don't become acceptable just because you're neurodivergent. Boundaries, they still matter, so does growth. At the same time, I get the appeal of embracing the cool part of being neurodivergent, but for years we were told that we were broken, we were told that we were lazy, we were weird. Like literally, I was known as a lazy person. If you were in my secondary school, you know that in secondary school I was so disorganized. I was so disorganized, like I didn't know my left from my right. So finding out that I'm autistic did feel like a kind of secret weapon. And also find out I was ADHD too. Like I suddenly understood why I thought the way I did. And in a weird way, it was empowering. It made me feel less alone. It made me feel more seen. And it's okay to take pride in that, to find strength in it, to feel community in it. But pride and aesthetic aren't the same thing. Neurodivergence isn't a costume, is not a punchline, is not a mood board. It's a real set of challenges tied up with very real systems that were never built for us. Even I myself, I do things to help me manage my ADHD. I wake up in the morning before I go out. I make sure to like, arrange my bed, lay my bed. Every house I move into, I have like a nail that is stuck to the doors so that I keep my key there. My key is very, very colorful. My key is so colorful. Let me show you what my key looks like. So this is my key. This is literally my key. It doesn't suit my aesthetic, but this helps it very easy for me to identify my key if I, throw it somewhere and keep it somewhere where I don't where I can't find it. So it does not fit my aesthetic, but is what I've done to help me. And I'm someone who always like forgets her key. I used to forget my key every time when I'm at work. There was a time during the peak of the winter I forgot my key and I went to work. None of my housemates were back. In my former house, none of my housemates were back, so I had to stay outside till 9 p.m. Got home from work like around 6:30. So I was just outside, just staying there and just freezing in the cold. From there, I started like either putting like key hangers by the door or putting a nail where I could just keep my key there. And I would remember my key anytime I'm moving out. So like my side, I would just see it and I would move out. So there are several things like my calendar are filled with things and reminders. So literally things I've helped to manage myself. My phone, they're always on silent. The only person that calls me and it rings is my girlfriend. My phone's on silent and I don't really like texting. Sometimes I don't feel like being on a call. And if someone sends a message and I'm not ready to respond at that moment, I say slow replies or answer you soon. I'm trying to distress. I try also communicate myself to my friends and be like, oh, I'm not in the mood to text now. When I'm in the mood, I'm going to reply. Those are things that I've done that actually helped my neurodivergence and also not being able to hurt the next person that may not understand what I'm going through. So before we slap a pastel caption on it and make it a quirky TikTok label, we should probably ask ourselves, are we sharing this to connect or to simplify something that was never simple to begin with? Now let's talk about what is simple. The daily reality. Because once you strip away the labels, the discourse, the hashtags, you're left with the parts that nobody wants to post, the hard part, the real part, and that's where we are going next. So now we're speaking about the real struggles of mental health. So here we're going to speak about mental health, work, and social life beyond the labels. Let's drop the aesthetic and talk about what actually happens when you're neurodivergent. Not the curated TikToks, not the pastel Instagram carousel. We're talking about the real stuff, the stuff that nobody posts about. I'm talking about depression, anxiety, job loss, social dysfunction, medical gaslighting, burnout so intense that it feels like your body is short circuiting in real time. And I put this out because these are the things that are happening to me. And this is what neurodivergence looks like when it's not being filtered through a trending sound. Start with mental health. Autistic people are 4 times more likely to experience depression. Up to 40% will deal with a clinically significant depressive episode at some point, and for autistic women, the numbers are worse. By age 25, 77% have already been diagnosed with at least one mental health condition. ADHD isn't better. Around 68% of women with ADHD report major depression compared to 34% of women without it. That's a massive gap. But somehow, people still think that ADHD is just being distracted and autism is being socially awkward. No, these are full body neurological conditions with measurable impacts on mental health. This isn't overthinking, it's backed by data. Most people with these conditions, they don't even get diagnosed until the damage is already done. The shame, the self blame, the burnout, years of wondering why you fail at things that seem effortless to everyone. And that's literally me. Yo, I feel so emotional telling you guys about this because this is myself describing to you guys, and somewhere at the back of my mind, if I could cry, I would. Eventually, that breaks something. And even if you push through that, if you survive the school years, if you survive the shame, if you figure out what's going on and you get a diagnosis, you still have to deal with work. And that's where it gets worse. I have been fired 5 times and I just got fired last week. And if I tell you, you wouldn't believe I got fired because I was fired for flossing and reading a book. That was enough. That's what I was called for flossing and reading a book when there was no customer or client around. Despite the fact that I knew all the objectives of the company, the service models, I knew literally everything. Even when there was a gang that came into our branch and I was the only person working, I was able to de-escalate the whole situation, even though I had never experienced that and I was so scared after, but I was able to de-escalate the whole situation by myself. But I was called in for flossing and reading a book when service was slow and I just needed to do something to pass away time. No discussion, nothing. I was not given warning. I was just terminated on the spot. I've also lost interviews because of my dyslexia. One employer decided, apparently they thought that I was reading the answer from a book because it was online. And the thing is, I wasn't. They put the message in the chat, and because I was nervous and I was tense, I took long to read it because I couldn't figure out what they were saying. And they said, you answered the question right. You answered everything well, but we just thought you were reading. And how would I read? How would I know the questions you're going to ask me? And that's all it took. One pause, gone. I used to disclose my disabilities on application and I stopped doing it after I left a long-term job that I had in 2023. And after what happened when I got rejected for an application because of my dyslexia, my girlfriend told me, stop putting it again. So basically, I once had a manager who treated me like I was asking for luxury perks when I asked for basic accommodations. I asked for software to help with my dyslexia. I asked for extra time to complete tasks and also extra time for ADHD related task planning, things that should have been routine. And it took me 2 years of asking for him to give me. And the reason why he gave me was because I reported him to HR. Every request that I made from joining that work in February 2022, it got resolved in 1 week. Yeah. And that's how fake the barrier was. The problem wasn't the accommodation, it was his attitude. I remember when I was leaving and I told him, I'm sure you would never employ any other person that has ADHD. And he laughed and said, no, that's not it. We don't discriminate. But I know what I experienced and I know what he would do next. And that's the problem with a lot of workspaces. They do not want to support you. They want you to conform or disappear. And one thing he used to do during like when we're having like supervision meetings, he'd be telling me, why are you not looking at me when I'm speaking to you? And I told him, I'm not good with eye contact. I am not good with eye contact. Even with my own girlfriend, like I'm not good with eye contact. She's like, look at me, and I'm like, no. Like she's like, look, like she's trying. I'm like, I can't. Like it's awkward. I'm not good with eye contact. And even where I just got fired, sometimes I need space for myself. But my manager, she would be telling me that, why am I not speaking to her? And I'm like, she'll be like, you're not speaking to me. It's awkward that you're not speaking to me. And I'm like, I just need time for myself. Sometimes, not sometimes, every time when I speak for so long, I get drained, I get tired, like physically tired. Speaking, talking, like really, really takes something from me. It drains me. So when I know that, oh, if I'm working a long shift, I have to like keep quiet most of the time so that I'll reserve my energy. She never understood that. And there was even a time when I was like sick, but I was at work and I was not saying anything. And she asked me, she was like, do you want to go home? I was like, I wish I could, but obviously I have to work. And then I asked her why, and I was expecting her to be like, oh, because you're obviously sick and everything. And she said, no, because you're not saying anything and it's awkward just sitting down here, you're not saying anything. Like, people should learn how to live in silence. It's not going to kill you. So basically, this is why the unemployment rate for autistic adults is estimated to be between 50% and 85%. For ADHD, the data shows employees are 60% more likely to be fired, not because they can't do their job, but because they don't perform the way bosses expect. Show up late, you're unreliable. Ask too many questions, you're difficult. Can't network at after hour drinks, you're not a team player. I once lost a promotion for not making small talk. My work was fine, my performance was solid, but apparently not participating in enough socializing just meant that I did not fit the culture. Neurodivergence doesn't stop at executive dysfunction. It affects everything, including how people perceive your character. And socially, it's no better. Autistic people get labeled cold or robotic. ADHDers, they get labeled flaky or inconsiderate, even when the reason is literally neurological. I've had friendships dissolve because I didn't text back fast enough, real talk, which honestly, like, I actually admit, like, one thing, I'm defensive, yeah, but at the end of the day, I always admit when I'm wrong. I won't say I am defensive. I'm like, I can be defensive. I can be defensive. I really can be defensive because sometimes I have to know why I'm apologizing to you. Like, if you don't tell me, if I cannot make it in my head why I'm apologizing to you, yeah, I wouldn't. That's a red flag. My thing is, I have to know, because people used to take the fact that I used to apologize too easily. They used to take that to manipulate me. So now you have to give me a reason why I should apologize to you. Why? What makes sense in my head is what makes sense in my head, which is a bad thing. I get it, but honestly, it's just what it is, isn't it? But yeah, so like I said, I've had friendships dissolve because I didn't text back fast enough, or because I needed to isolate during burnout, or because I didn't pick up on a cue. I want to try to explain things to say, hey, this is how my brain works. Out of sight is out of mind. Literally, my dad will call me and be like, why have you refused to call your dad? And I'm like, I don't even know how to explain to him that if he's not there, I can't remember him. Literally. It's either when I explain to this to some people, it does not land, or they wouldn't care. And this happens even in queer spaces, communities. You're expected to be more inclusive. But if you can't follow the vibe, if you don't match the tone, if you don't mask well enough, you get sidelined there too. Even among other neurodivergent people, there can be friction. ADHDers, they tend to be more fast-paced and chaotic. Autistics can be structured and literal. That can clash unless both people know the context. And there is me that has the two of them. So unless there is mutual understanding between these two people, that's when a relationship and a friendship can work. And even then, sometimes it still goes wrong. Sensory issues just makes everything worse. Loud environments, chaotic lighting, crowded spaces, all of it can wreck your day. You could be fine 1 minute and completely overwhelmed the next. That's not moodiness, it's your nervous system getting overloaded. And when that happens, emotional regulation drops. You cry, you snap, you withdraw. People think you're overreacting, but the thing is, you're not. You're overloaded. If trauma is involved, and for most of us it actually is, the response is even worse. Rejection, criticisms, conflict. These things, they don't just sting, they feel catastrophic. That's where the burnout actually kicks in. That point where our system just shuts down. For autistic people, burnout can include losing previously functioning skills like speech, like memory, or even motor control. Like me, like sometimes, I don't know if you guys notice, sometimes I mispronounce words, or when I'm recording, there's so many times I can't even remember. Even when I'm speaking to someone, I'm like, what did I say? What did I say? I forget things that I've said. There was a time I forgot my laptop password. My laptop password has been the same for God knows how long. I forgot my laptop password. I was sitting from my laptop. I was like, what is my password? What is my password? That's why some of my friends, they know my password in case that happens. Because I'm like, what is my password? I cannot remember my password. For ADHD, it's extreme fatigue and cognitive collapse. I've experienced it, and after years of academic success and masking in professional spaces, I hit a wall. I have a master's degree in HR and I've not used it. And when you hit a wall, you cannot think, you can't function, you're just barely existing. And the only solution is for you to quit, is for you to rest, is for you to stop masking, for you to drop the performance. But that's not always possible. And it shouldn't have to get that bad before support shows up. The world isn't designed for us. That's not a dramatic statement. That's a fact. And sometimes the system says the quiet part out loud. Recently, the UK government floated the idea that any child who comes out as trans should be screened for autism because apparently being neurodivergent invalidates your gender identity, as if being autistic makes you incapable of self knowledge. Honestly, it's absurd and it's dangerous, but that's a story for another day. The point is, neurodivergence isn't a trend, it's not an aesthetic, it's not a superpower. It's a neurological difference that affects every part of your life. It affects the good, the bad, the stuff that no one posts about. And until that reality is understood and accommodated, the struggle doesn't end with the diagnosis. It literally starts there. So now, conclusion. Here we are after all that. If you made it this far, congratulations. Drop a heart emoji. Not because this was long, but because you just sat through a brutally honest unpacking of what it actually means to live at the intersection of queerness, neurodivergence, blackness, and womanhood. Which, let's be real, is not trending on TikTok. Let's talk about how we are going to embrace all of who we are. When I was writing this, I didn't set out to become a walking identity matrix. I was just a person trying to figure out why everything felt harder than it should. Sometimes I used to be like, what if I was neurotypical? What if I did not experience the trauma I did as a child? What if my life was smooth? Would I still be like this? Would it feel like I am in a loop, and a loop of sadness, a loop of depression, a loop of anxiety, a loop of losing things, a loop of not knowing what to do next? So when I started writing this, I didn't set out to become an identity matrix. I was just a person trying to figure out why everything felt harder than it should, why jobs slipped through my fingers even though I feel I'm qualified, why friends drifted, why therapists kept treating symptoms instead of asking better questions. I was exhausted by labels, but now I use them not as excuses, but as explanations, as tools. ADHD, autistic, queer, black woman. These are not separate files in a cabinet. They don't happen one at a time. They stack, they layer, and they shape how the world treats you, whether it admits it or not. So let's stop pretending that these patterns are coincidental. Queer people are more likely to be neurodivergent. That's not a speculation, that's documented. Some researchers point to neurological overlaps, others to the fact that if your brain already doesn't follow social scripts, you're less likely to follow gender ones. Maybe it's both, doesn't really matter, but the thing is, the link exists. Black women, meanwhile, are constantly being misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all because the diagnostic model, they were never built for us. They were built for white boys who obsess over trains, not black girls who go quiet when overstimulated or lash out because no one listened the first time that they spoke. And when we do finally get seen, it's often through the wrong lens. Borderline, bipolar, angry, overly sensitive, dramatic. No one stops to ask if maybe we're just burnt out from living in a world that was never built for our wiring. Then we hit the other extreme, the sugar coating. Neurodivergence becomes aesthetic, a curated quirk, a badge on social media, something to romanticize until it's no longer cute, until someone asks for accommodation or struggles with basic executive functions or melts down in a grocery store. Suddenly, it's not a vibe anymore. It's a problem, it's a liability, it's an inconvenience. And that's this tightrope that we walk, too invisible until you're too much. So let's be real, we don't need to be seen as superheroes. We don't need to be pitied either. I hate pity. I hate people pitying me. Don't pity me, okay? Do not pity me. We just want systems that don't actively sabotage us. We want schools that don't punish ADHD kids into trauma. Employers, we want employers that do not fire people for reading on their break. We want clinicians who take the time to learn that masking isn't wellness, it's survival. Because the reality is, we're not broken. The world just wasn't calibrated for us. A sensory friendly classroom isn't a luxury. It's what lets a kid learn instead of being shut down. Letting an employee work from home twice a week isn't a special treatment. It's the reason they stay employed. And listening, actually listening, when a black woman says, "Hey, I think I'm neurodivergent," that's the difference between a misdiagnosis and a breakthrough. My story had a relatively good ending. I got answers, I got language, I found people who speak the same unspoken dialect that I do, but most don't get that far. Some never even start, especially if they are poor, they are queer, or they are radicalized, or even not even taken seriously. Which is why this can't stop at personal essays or occasional awareness weeks. We need research, we need reform, we need people from within these communities at the center of the conversations, not as afterthoughts, not case studies. Also, side note, I said this earlier, the UK government saying that trans kids should be screened for autism. That's not safeguarding, that is erasure. The implication is that if you're neurodivergent, your identity isn't valid, is absurd. And if you're wondering how dystopias start, that's one way. But that's a story for another day, like I said. For now, just know this: neurodivergence is not a costume that you put on, it's a full body experience. Some days it's beautiful, some days it's hell, but it's real. And the sooner we accept that without sugarcoating, without fear, the sooner that we can start building a world where no one has to wait until they're 30 or until they're 40 or even 50 to finally hear, "You're not defective, you're just different," and that's okay. The rest, the research, the advocacy, the policy changes, all of that starts when enough of us stops trying to fit and start asking why the system was so narrow in the first place. We're not looking for special treatment. We are just done pretending this isn't happening. So guys, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you guys so much. I really do love and appreciate each and every one of you. It was so good writing and reading this and researching, because when I was fired from my job, it was like I was so shocked. I was so shocked. I've been fired for so many things, but this one just cut the cake. I was very surprised, and everything happens for a reason. I got fired, and currently I'm looking for another job, but I want to go into something more creative. It's just that the creative field, especially here, they don't really pay that much. So that's another thing, because I have bills that I need to cater for, and also to cater for myself, and I have a cat that is dependent on me. So again, it is what it is. I'm trying my best to, apply for jobs and also chase what I love, which is creating content. So I decided to put this and just write this, because again, I don't even know how to even tell people, especially like people like managers, and be like, "Oh, I'm ADHD, I'm this," because most of the time they never understand. And it's very sad, honestly, that I tend to mask that part of me, and it's very stressful. Even though I got fired, which is a bummer, I am also glad I did get fired, because funny enough, I had written, like 2 days before that, I had written a letter to my GP saying how my work was depressive, how my work was depressing, was adding to my depression. It was adding to my depression in so many ways, and it was really making me think of doing things I didn't want to do to myself, because I just thought that was the way out. So I think God just saw that and was like, "Okay, I'm going to get you fired for the dumbest reason." I just believe that something better is coming to me. So yeah, I just thought that I should just put this out there and just speak about it. So if you resonated with it, kindly like, share, subscribe if you care. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being there, for staying to the end. And I hope you guys got resonated by this. I have somewhere I need to be. I kind of got a work coach that I work with every week, and they're helping me to transition to doing what I love and to make applying for jobs and being satisfied with my work way much more quicker. So they give me like tasks to do, which I've been doing. And yeah, so apart from that, I am okay, I'm good, I'm blessed. Everything happens for a reason. If you reach the end, kindly drop a key emoji, because I just opened the door to something bigger. Who knows? But yeah, thank you guys so much. Please share this video with your friends. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really do love and appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, bye.